and Sarah Pagel. We had a previous attempt that was dealing with a lot of technical difficulties and not working, but we persisted and we are back. And Hannah's camera is now working for me, and I can hear her. Let me know in the chat if you guys can hear her once she starts talking. Hannah is the author of a short story in Voices of the Future, Stories of Courage and Compassion. And her story is Zelophehad's Daughters. I will find it here real quick. And I am excited for you guys to hear from her because she is super cool. Her story is very neat and very unique. And I'm excited for you guys to hear from Sarah also a little bit later. So Hannah, start us out by telling us some fun facts about you.
Fun facts about me. So I'm a pianist, but my favorite instruments are actually strings. So guitars, fiddle, banjo, mandolin, that kind of thing. I own a mandolin, but I don't really play it. I just love acoustic music, especially strings. Those make me very, very happy. Trying to think. Cool weather also makes me very happy, so I'm very happy this week. It cooled down a little bit here in Texas. And bouquets make me very happy, and I have them as backgrounds on my computers wherever I work. So there you go.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, the cool weather in Texas probably doesn't go together for you very often, does it?
No, but when it does, it makes me just grin and be so happy as I walk to work and back. So, yep.
That's great. What is your story about?
I like to describe it as Little Women meets the time of the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. And it's a bit of a mouthful, but that's the best way I can think of to describe it. It's biblical fiction about 5 Israelite sisters that are mentioned in Numbers 27. And their father is dead. They have no brothers. So when Moses orders a census, the girls realize that if they can't get themselves counted in their father's place, his name is going to go extinct and they're going to lose their place among their people. So it's their story of trying to get on that census before it's too late.
Yes, and I love that you highlighted this story because it's such an underrated story. I think a lot of people don't even know that this story exists. So I thought it was really cool that you fleshed it out into a story and brought more familiarity with it to some people who maybe wouldn't have known very well otherwise.
Cute.
Who is your story for?
So I write for homeschooling high school and middle schoolers who want clean, relatable stories about true biblical figures who changed the world through faith and perseverance. So my stories are specifically for that age range and that type of person, but they're really for anybody who's looking for a book that's going to guide them into the lives of heroes of the faith and then send them back out again with that same courage and faith to live their own stories. So it's kind of specific, but also broad.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I love sending people back out into the world to live their own stories of courage and faith, which I think is actually very similar to my message and mission, which is interesting because our genres are like as different as they could possibly be. So it's interesting how much overlap there actually is in our audiences and in our messages.
It's pretty exciting. As I was thinking about the answer to that question, I was like, I think this sounds like why Jenny writes. So there you go.
Yep. The two-pronged approach, the fantasy and the biblical.
There you go. Gotta have both.
Yes. What inspired this specific story, and what did it look like for the story to go from concept to completion?
Funny story. Necessity. I needed a short story, and it was one of our main projects. Kind of this anthology was our capstone project in the author conservatory. So getting together a short story for the anthology was a big deal, and our instructors were helping us through that process. So to start off with, I brought 3 short story ideas to my instructor, and she looked at them with me and talked through them with me, and then she was like, I think you have a 4th concept in you. So I ended up back at the drawing board, and I was talking with my mom and trying to brainstorm what story idea I should try, what 4th idea I should come up with. And she suggested this story of Zelophehad's daughters, of these 5 sisters in Numbers. And honestly, I was not super thrilled with the idea. I really like stories of people who made a difference, a long-lasting impact, and I could not really see that with the girl's story. I was like, okay, it's five sisters, so that's cool, but what's the big deal? But as I began to like talk with my mom about it and brainstorm and pray about the idea, I started seeing just how big a deal their story actually was. It wasn't just them being courageous for themselves. Um, because of what they did, they actually got to set precedent for like their entire nation and make a way for other women like them to be able to preserve their family name in the future and their place in the promised land. And then the best part was that God himself actually commended these girls, which was crazy. So as I realized that, I got more excited about the story and began to believe that maybe I could actually get behind it and enjoy it. Plus, I have three younger sisters, so there's four of us, and I just love the sister element to it. So that also contributed to why I decided to write the story. And that's kind of how I ended up with the concept. When I took it to my instructor, she was like, "Oh yes, this is good. Go write this story." So that's what I ended up with, and then the rest was kind of history.
Yep. Yep. That's great. And I think this story is one that's so easy to just breeze past because it doesn't take up that many verses. But the more you think about it, the more you realize how significant it really is and how much courage it must have taken those girls to do what they did. So yeah, that's really cool. And yeah, sometimes those moments when you're pushed to give just a little bit more in writing or when the really good stuff comes.
Yes.
So one of the main reasons that I don't write this genre is that it sounds like a lot of research to me. So I'm curious what your research process looks like, and I really felt like you did a good job of making this time period feel very immersive and believable, even though it's so far back from our own time period. It's not even like World War II, which would take a lot of research, but this is just such a long time ago. So how did it work for you to take that very distant time period and make it feel immersive and accurate?
So with my biblical fiction stories, I kind of have two phases of research. My first phase is as I'm actually planning out the story. So as I'm coming up with the idea and as I'm outlining it and all of those kind of things. And it's more that research is more for the big picture plot stuff that allows me to build a believable and accurate framework for the story. I read commentaries a lot during that time period, like just trying to find out, okay, how are different ways that we've interpreted this passage? What does this confusing sentence maybe mean or not mean? And that kind of thing. And then just do other research as well on the internet, just to make sure that I'm staying true to everything that we do know about the story so that the plot will be as accurate to the real people's experience as possible. I don't want to just go off and plot something because it makes a good story, but would never have happened that way because that just it's not believable. And so do the best I can to figure out, okay, what do these verses mean? What does this turn of phrase mean? Or what could it mean? And then try to pick the thing that seems most believable to me and put all those details together to build the framework for the story that really helps me have a good place to go as I move forward. And then before I actually start drafting and writing out the first draft of the story, I'll do another round of research to dig into the smaller details, like what kind of clothes did they wear, or would they have been eating goat cheese, or what side of the camp would the sun have risen on, and where was the girls' tent, and therefore where would the sun be at this time of day? That kind of thing. And just kind of going into the smaller details that you don't need when you're plotting a story, but when you actually start writing, you kind of have to know. So that's kind of like my second big phase of research. And then I'll sprinkle research throughout, especially like as I'm editing and I realize, oh, it would be good to have this character have a piece of jewelry. What kind of jewelry did they wear? So then I'll have to go research that. But in general, it's the two big phases that get me set up to kind of have that foundation as I write the story.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it sounds like that's a good way to keep from getting just too flooded with details at the beginning of the process, and yeah, make sure that you're researching stuff that is actually going to be useful and not spending hours and hours on stuff that you're not actually going to. So that sounds like a good process.
Thank you.
How does your story address the themes of courage and compassion?
Ooh, I really like this question. Um, the funny thing is, I planned to write Zelophehad's Daughters before I knew I was going to be in the Courage and Compassion anthology, but God knew what he was doing, obviously. So here I am, and in this short story, the girls have to show incredible courage to ask to get their father's name on the census. You don't do that in that time period, in that culture. And so that took incredible courage. And then the compassion element comes into the story too, as the Lord responds to the girls' request in a way that gives them what they need and provides for their needs and for what they're asking, and all of those elements. So it actually has both to it, which I didn't plan out to begin with. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought of the compassion side of it before. I definitely saw the courage side in the girls just being very persistent about actually this is important. We do need to talk to people about this. And just not giving up when things were hard. I definitely seen that, but yeah, I hadn't really thought about the compassion, but that does make a lot of sense. As one of the voices of the future, what do you hope your story or this anthology says about the future of storytelling?
So I was thinking about this question and I was like, I don't know. But as I was kind of thinking about it and just kind of, yeah, thinking through it yesterday, I really hope that this book and these short stories, not just mine, give readers hope that there are writers out there telling the types of stories that they want to read, and that they will be able to find the wholesome and solid and immersive stories that they're really longing for. Because at least for me, when you ask me what my favorite books are, they're like decades old because I have trouble finding books that I feel comfortable reading that are newer. And so, just as I was kind of like thinking through this and praying about it, I was like, oh, I hope this gives people hope that there are real stories that they can enjoy reading, like coming out now, as opposed to 50 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a common theme among quite a few of our classmates in the conservatory, where we feel like a lot of our favorite books are quite old, and we would like to see more of that kind of book being published today. And I think there are a lot of readers who also feel that way and who feel like they don't have a favorite book among anything that's been published in the last 50 years. So I do think it's exciting in these anthologies to see authors who are hopefully creating some new stories that will be in the same vein or in the same spirit as some of the older stories that we also really like. I already see one question in the chat. If anybody else has questions for Hannah, go ahead and type them in the chat. And while you're typing, Hannah, where can people learn more about you and your stories?
So the best place to learn more about me is my email list. I have an amazing team of people partnering with me on this writing journey. And so to all the lovely people watching, I'd love to have you join me and my team as we kind of work together to tell these untold stories of true heroes of the faith. I keep my team updated with those emails. So talking about what I'm doing or where my writing is at or how they can be involved and what events I'm part of, like this live and things like that. Deep thoughts, good stuff like that. So my email list is the main spot to really connect.
And I will get the link to join your email list as well as your website up in the description of this video when I post the recording. But for now, Hannah, can you tell people where your website is?
Yes, my website is byhannahmarie.com. Not buy as in you're going to go buy something at the store, but like I'm an author and this book is by me. So
Yes, byhannahmarie.com. Not like goodbye, but like byhannahmarie.com. Yeah, go there, join Hannah's email list. If you're watching the recording later, then all of those links will be in the description. And also don't forget to check out Voices of the Future Volume 2, Stories of Courage and Compassion, where you can read Hannah's stories. And 100% of proceeds from this book go toward helping the authors attend writers' conferences. So if you buy this book from Hannah, then you can help Hannah attend a writers' conference, and that can make a huge difference in her getting published and bringing more of those stories to the world that may be exactly the kind of story that you wish you had more of. So definitely go to Hannah's website to find the book, right? You can buy the book from Hannah at Hannah's website.
Yep, you can buy
So
a signed copy on my website. So
a
there you
signed copy, even better. So definitely go to byhannahmarie.com and check that out. So I see a question in the chat that says, Hannah, how do you recognize divine inspiration when it comes?
go. That's a good question. Let me think. Um, I'm not perfect at it, but it takes practice. And over the last almost 4 years now that I've been writing in the conservatory, and now I've graduated, but just working on these big projects, it's been a process for me of learning to hear his voice and just asking him about things like little things, big things. Um, and just kind of learning it's not like he speaks to me verbatim necessarily, or I hear a voice or something, although that might be nice because then it would be clear. But a lot of times he does give me a way to say something as I'm thinking over a sentence. I'm like, this is not working and I don't know what to say. And then he will give me the idea for like, well, start it this way and then go from there. Or you know, just asking him for wisdom on what themes I should highlight in a story, and brainstorming with people. I'm a verbal processor, so brainstorming helps me a lot. So brainstorming with people and allowing him to use them to help me as I'm bouncing ideas off of people. So that sometimes is where that inspiration comes from. It looks different, really. Really, it's just me asking him for help and then him doing different things at different times. So he might just tell me, go call your mom and brainstorm with her because she's great at brainstorming. Or he might be like, well, say it this way and then it'll be good to go. Or he might say, go take a break and quit banging your head against the desk. And then I need to go take a break instead of trying to sit there and figure it out. It just depends on the situation and what needs to happen. And sometimes I feel like I don't hear anything at all and then I get very frustrated. So it's definitely a process. But yeah, just part of what helps me is when I hear something or think I've heard something, just going ahead and doing that thing, and walking in obedience to that. And then that actually trains my, not my real ears, but my inner ear to be able to hear him the next time he says something. So honestly, it's just over and over again practicing. And maybe I get it wrong sometimes, and he covers that. And maybe I wrote the wrong scene and we can fix it later and it's okay. But just that practice, I think, has really been huge for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. I like that a lot. Hannah, is there anything else that you would like to share about before we do our best to bring Sarah on?
Um, I don't think so. This has been really fun, and I'm super glad you guys stuck around, even though I had all the technical difficulties. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Hannah. Thank you for sticking with us. Really glad that we finally got it working and that we got to hear from you today.
Thank you so much for setting this up, Jenny. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad to hear that. And enjoy the rest of the cooler than average Texas weather.
Thank you. I will. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, we will see if Sarah can join us and talk to us like Hannah did. Go ahead and give Hannah a hand, everybody. Can we get some clapping emojis in the chat? I see a Sarah.
See me? Am I sideways?
You are sideways, but I do see and hear you.
Okay. Let me.
Oh, thank you. Now we have some clapping.
There we go.
Yay!
Okay. No, spoke too soon. All the issues today.
Yeah, I think it's finally working though.
There
Can
we
you guys
go.
hear Sarah? I think they can hear you. Let us know for sure if you hear Sarah. Sarah, thanks for being here today. Thanks for working through all of the tech issues that we had to deal with to get you here today. Sarah is also an author of a story in Voices of the Future, Volume 2. In fact, she is the author of the story that is the first story in Voices of the Future Volume 2, The Colors in the Well. I looked at that like I didn't know the title of your story unless I double checked it. I do know the title of your story. But anyway, Sarah, thank you for being here. What are some fun facts about you?
Yeah, well, I'm excited to be here, and I'm so glad that we were able to conquer the Wi-Fi goblins or whatever was going on. So thank you for yeah, your patience. Fun facts about me. One of my hobbies is fencing. I did modern Olympic fencing for a while, and lately I've been getting into HEMA, so that's been really fun. I like how intense it is, and just it's nice to be able to move after sitting at a desk writing, and swords. So
Yeah. Man, I didn't know that. I've always wanted to try fencing. I don't think I'd be very good at it, but it looks really fun.
it
And
is
probably
really fun.
like helps you write sword fighting scenes, I would think. Um,
I haven't written a sword fight in a long time, but it did help with the couple times that I have. So.
there you go. So tell me what your story in Voices of the Future is about.
So, my story is a middle grade historical fantasy about a girl who is at a new school, but all of the students think she's cursed and she's ostracized for that. So, she's determined to break that curse and is told that the only way to do that is by climbing down a well and then climbing back up and proving that this haunted well didn't claim her. But there is something waiting for her at the bottom that is far more than a myth.
Yes. And yeah, I like that that mystery element of the concept of like what is down there. And it's a lot of fun to read the story and find out what is down there. Who is your story for?
My story is for the kids that feel like they don't belong or that they don't quite fit in. And I really hope that this short story can just make them feel a little less alone. I think that's a win if there's one kid who reads it and has the story just um, make them feel a little less alone.
Yeah, yeah, and that's such a common element of that part of life is feeling like you don't fit in, feeling like you don't know how to make friends. So I think that's very needed for kids in the middle grades, and something that will connect with them a lot. What inspired your story and how did it go from concept to completion?
So, kind of like Hannah, I needed a short story and I had nothing, absolutely nothing. And so the deadline was looming, and I ended up getting on an office hours at the Author Conservatory with Nadine Brandis and just asking her, what do you do when you have this deadline and you just don't have anything? And her advice was excellent, as you might expect from Nadine Brandis. She suggested one, to pray, and then also to go back to your roots of what inspires you, what kind of brings out that creativity, and really return to that. So after the call, I went out on my back porch and just prayed and was like, I need something, please, Lord. And then started writing down just a list of things that I loved and that inspired me. And I ended up landing on Greek mythology. I grew up reading Percy Jackson, so that was always something that was very special and that has inspired me. And it also fused a lot with um, just what I was going through when I was a kid reading those books and what I wish someone could have told me or that I'd had a book to tell me. And those two things really blended together to form the colors in the well, or at least the seed of what the colors in the well grew from.
Yes. Yeah. Since you mentioned Greek mythology, it makes me wonder, have you been listening to Epic the Musical like it seems like everybody else in the world is?
I have listened to some of it. I haven't listened to all of it, but what I've heard is really cool. And it's just such a brilliant idea of putting like Greek mythology and the Iliad and the Odyssey like in musical form is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking of that as you were talking. I was like, well, for those who are fans of Epic the Musical, they might want to pick up The Colors in the Well, even though that might not be like the first comparison that would come to mind. Like, if you're looking for something to read after listening to Epic the Musical, like maybe try Colors in the Well because it also has some great mythology inspiration behind it.
Yes, absolutely.
So, your story combines real world and magical elements. How do you blend the familiar and the fantastical while making both feel equally real and interesting?
Ooh. So I love the challenge of blending the real world with magic because I think it forces me to look at the real world differently in ways that I really like. It forces me to ask a lot of questions about like, okay, I see this rusty old gate. What's the story behind that? Why do I find it so beautiful? And what story is behind it? And it really forces me to look at the world with wonder and see those pockets of magic in the everyday. And I think part of helping it feel grounded, my personal guideline when writing is that I don't ever want magic to solve all my characters' problems. And so when the magic um, causes problems sometimes or forces them to face sort of their internal journey, I find it helps it feel a lot more grounded than if it's used as a get out of anything kind of card. So I think really blending the magic with the character's internal journey is something that has helped me keep my stories more grounded.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's really important that the magic is about the character journey. It's definitely not about fixing the problems. If anything, it's probably giving the character a lot more problems
Yes.
than than it's fixing. And maybe it plays a part in resolving some things, but it's really about the character having to overcome their lies to resolve things. So yeah, that's a really good point. How does your story address the themes of courage and compassion?
I think a big part of this story is Ivy, the main character, having the courage to one climb down the well. Like that's a big part, but I think deeper than that, it's the courage to face some of these things that other people are saying about her and decide how to react to that. Um, and if she's going to let that define her, or if she's going to blaze a new path for herself, and also have compassion for people that um, your first impression may not be accurate about, and that you may find as you get to know them more, like you have so much more in common, and you can have that compassion and that empathy, and realize that even though your situation is different, or at least someone seems different at first glance, you actually have a lot in common.
Yeah, yep. I do remember that from the story of there being some elements of compassion for characters that you maybe didn't know if they were going to get compassion at the beginning. And and yeah, the story really is based around that one specific act of courage of climbing down the well. Which I know for some people like scary things in the water are just like can barely deal with them. I'm not like particularly creeped out or grossed out by scary water things, but I know for a lot of people, climbing down a well that might have something scary at the bottom is like the worst thing possible. So the fact that this character does so courageously, um, to probably seem just yeah, it's courageous to anybody, but yeah, especially since that can be an extra disturbing thing to do. As one of the voices of the future, what do you hope your story or this anthology as a whole says about the future of storytelling?
One thing I'd really love to see more of in the future is more historical fantasy, more magical realism, those types of stories. I think they're too few and far between, and so I really hope that there's been this resurgence, it seems like, in a lot of really cool subgenres of fantasy, and you see a lot of authors doing different things, whether it's like the cozy fantasy that's happening. And so I really hope that that spreads out into other genres, particularly historical fantasy and magical realism, and those just softer fantasy stories that are, like you mentioned earlier, a blend of the familiar and the fantastical.
Yeah, I have definitely seen that resurgence too. And I think it makes a lot of sense because even looking back to folk tales and the oldest fantasy stories, they usually took place in our world. And
Mm-hmm.
so really could be considered magical realism or historical fantasy in a way. Um, so I do think it's cool to see more of those stories that almost feel like modern folk tales in a way, maybe. And I think it will be exciting to see what you add to that space in the future as you keep writing. So, if you guys have questions for Sarah, I already see one in the chat. If you guys have more questions for Sarah, go ahead and put them in the chat. And while you do that, Sarah, let people know where can we learn more about you online or find more about your writing.
Yeah, so the best place to hear about my writing and books that I'm reading and my publishing journey is going to be my email list. You can sign up for that. I know there's going to be a link going out, you said, with
Mhm.
this, or if you go to sarahpagelauthor.com, you can sign up there. I'm also on Instagram. The handle is at sarahpagelauthor, so you can see what I'm up to there. Yeah.
Yep. And people can find the book on your website, right?
Yes, they can. Yep.
Yes, go to Sarah's website, sign up for her email list, and find the book. When you buy Voice of the Future, Stories of Courage and Compassion from Sarah, you will help her attend writers' conferences. And attending writers' conferences will give her a chance to pitch her books to editors and agents. And if you would like to see more magical realism and historical fantasy and stories for middle grade kids to help them feel less alone, and all that good stuff, then you should go to Sarah's website and buy a copy of Voices of the Future Volume 2. So I do see one question in the chat, and this question says, is magic strictly imaginary, or are there magical elements in what we call reality if we stop and ponder them?
Ooh. So this reminds me a lot of a quote from one of the great science fiction writers that says any sufficiently advanced technology can be mistaken for magic. So I think there is an element that people like to just label magic to things they don't fully understand. And there's actually a line about that in my short story. So there you go.
Yes, for an even more fleshed out answer, read the short story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, is there anything else that you would like to share before we call it a day?
I just want to say thank you so much, Jenny, for doing this and for battling all of the Wi-Fi issues. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I've really enjoyed hanging out with y'all.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and you're welcome. I'm so glad it finally worked for you to join us. It was great to hear from you today, great to learn even more about your story. Again, remember to check out Hannah's website and Sarah's website. Remember to check out Voice of the Future. And if you would like a free sample of Voices of the Future, you can get my short story, People of the Rain, from Voice of the Future Volume 1 by going to my website, jennygossell.com. JennyGossell.com. You can go to my website, and for free, you can get an audio recording of my short story, People of the Rain. And hopefully, that will give you even more of a clear idea of whether you want to, pick up some Voice of the Future copies for yourself, which obviously I think you should. So if you would like a free sample, then you can do that. Go to my website. And if you would like to see more author interviews and other bookish videos, then make sure to subscribe to my channel so that you will not miss those videos when they come out. And I think that's it for today. Thank you again, Sarah.
Thank
And
you.
thanks, Hannah, even though she's gone. Bye, guys.